So, welcome along to Halifax for a very special Timeform broadcast. Yeah. It's Royal Ascot on Tuesday, of course, the flat racing spectacular. So, in part of our build-up to that, we're going to do a live Facebook Q&A with Mr. Jamie Lynch. So, how are you, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. We've got an hour to fill, which sounds a lot of time, but it probably isn't by the time that we get through all the main race on each day, answer a few questions, whatever you've got. Obviously, I haven't got the answers to everything. I haven't got the talent or the tools at my disposal to answer everything. But we have got you involved, we have got me and Nick involved, and we've got this extra large bottle of whiskey in case things really go sour, so that's all right.
I did think you were going to turn up with an extra large top hat at one point.
No, not that for finery. So, where are we starting?
Right, well, I thought the best thing to do while we wait for a few questions to roll in. So if you want to ask Jamie a question, just comment below and press enter. It should come up for us on the screen. We've got the laptop off camera here so we can see what you're saying to us. I thought I'd give you a couple of pre-prepared questions, and the first one really is...
5 minutes doesn't count as pre-prepared.
Well, I've pre-prepared. Can you provide us with 3 bets for the week? So a nap, an each way and a lay.
Well, we'll come into this in more detail as we go along, but my nap, even though it's a short price, would be Ribchester. We'll talk about that particular fivefold, which have the bookies quaking by the sound of it. But Ribchester, for me, it's about the pool of horses he's up against. He's demonstrably better than them in the Lockinge Stakes. He's a horse who's developing new dimensions and new talents every single time we see him. He won the Jersey round here last year, or up the straight track. So you're looking for fault lines in all these short price favourites, and for me, there are none to be found in Ribchester. And if you're looking for a banker, a nap, I'm pretty sure that we can start the week with a bang with him. Not saying much outrageous, I know that, but I think that this horse really should be 4 to 6 on the betting, given that he's so far clear ahead of the pack. Each way, we're dealing in the handicaps. That's obviously the best part for each way purposes. And projection in the Wokingham is a horse who've had ringed in the calendar at home since about last July. Mm-hmm. When he was unlucky in the Stewards Cup Consolation. He just keeps shaping well time and again, this horse, and he's owned by the Royal Ascot Racing Club, and this has probably been a plan for him and not just me ever since day one almost. That's not the reason for fancying him, who he's owned by, because you can read the lines of this horse and they are exceptional in terms of the form lines he represents and the way he keeps shaping as well. So projection, a long-term plan, hopefully coming to fruition in the Wokingham. And then a lay, you struggle with lays, and we'll talk about the ups and downs of the shorter price horses in that specific accumulator.
Yeah.
And it's not really a horse to lay as such, but one who is taking out an unreasonable chunk in the market for me is Clemmy. It's the sister to Churchill, who's going for the Chesham Stakes. And the sort of natural assumption is that just because he did it, she's going to do it as well. But she was a bit behind schedule in terms of where he was at when she made her debut. And this assumption and presumption that she's going to make a similar leap to him, I think, is over-factored in the betting. And there are a few horses in there, and we'll discuss the race later on, the Chesham in particular, that I think are viable contenders. Because we've got a horse here, Nick, who's a short price favourite, relatively speaking, about 3 to 1. And there's about 6 or 7 ahead of her in the form ratings that we've got so far. And each of those has got big potential themselves. So just one of those cases where, would I recommend you lay Clemmy? No, because we're dealing in a horse who's 3 to 1 or thereabouts. But I think that that's a good race in which to have a bet, because she's taken out so much of the market, and pretty unreasonably so as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting. So moving on to the second question, and you teed it up quite nicely, really. There's talk all over social media. I mean, even whoever runs the Timeform live account has talked about it as well. There's this
idiot.
Well, I know he's not wise, is he? Yeah, there's been talk about this fivefold all week that has bookies running scared, and to run through it for you, it's Ribchester in the Queen Anne, the all-conquering Churchill in the St James Palace Stakes, they're 4 to 5 and 4 to 6 respectively. Caravaggio at evens in the Commonwealth Cup, Winter at 4 to 7 in the Commonwealth Stakes. Got Coronation Stakes, and Owen Order of St George at 5 to 6 in the Ascot Gold Cup. Where do you stand with this? Is it a good bet from a Timeform perspective, or is it one that you would just think that one of us is going to let us down here?
Well, Phil Bull would be turning his grave, but I'm not against having fivefolds, or certainly accumulators when dealing with short price favourites like this. it's quite snobbish sometimes to think, well, I wouldn't have that bet, and probably working at Timeform, you shouldn't have that bet, and I'll probably say it quietly, but who amongst us at a big meeting doesn't want to get involved with a long-term bet that could make a big difference? So from a personal point of view and from a betting point of view, no truck whatsoever with pulling horses together for an accumulator that might make a difference to you. As far as these are concerned, we can go through them individually, briefly, and just pull out the vulnerable ones and the positive ones. Ribchester I've talked about. I don't think that he can get beat in the Queen Anne, so tick. Churchill for me is still an unsteady and unsafe ground, only because you think back to the end of the Guineas at Newmarket, and I had the feeling of a cliffhanger. It didn't feel like a definitive result because of what happened in the race and because of the nature in the race. And when most people were cashing in on Churchill, all of you at home who backed him anti-post for the Guineas, when the race was concluding, I could almost hear the EastEnders because I don't think it was the end of that particular story. We haven't got Al Walker, who finished third that day, but we have got Barney Roy, and this Barney Roy is the one you would pick out to throw in against Churchill again, because Barney Roy, apart from being green, unsuited by the track, all at sea at the dip, undone tactically, and still having some lingering greenness about him, and the nature of the race didn't suit him. Apart from all that, he had everything in his favour at the Guineas. But he was beaten only a length. And I think that it won't take much for him to reverse form. Now, on the opposite side of that, Churchill clearly is the sort of horse who just does what's required. I have my doubts about that when he brushed Memas aside in the National Stakes last year and won by 4.5 lengths, because you know what people say, well, he never wins that impressively. He actually can turn it on when the mood takes him, but the more we're unlaying of Churchill, we're finding that there is this real hard diamond inside. And I made the point in one of my articles that listening to Ryan Moore, it sounds like the on-board experience is different from the on-looking experience, in that we see a horse who is taking a while to go through the gears and hit top speed, but from the way that Ryan talks about him, it feels like that this horse does everything that he wants him to at exactly the right time. So there's positives and negatives with the race, but we're talking about bankers here, and I don't think you can categorically say that Churchill is the best horse in that division just yet. And I think that Barney Roy's got a real shot at overturning that form. Different race, different circumstances, a more mature Barney Roy. That would stop me short from throwing Churchill in the accumulator. Now compare that, we'll skip ahead to Winter, who is so far ahead of her division that it's getting almost embarrassing now, isn't it? She was clinical at Newmarket, but she was brilliant in Ireland at the Curragh in the Irish 1000 Guineas. And it's clear to me and to everyone who watches that there is no horse in that specific division that can touch Winter. And we're looking 2-3 steps ahead for her now. An interesting relationship between her and Churchill, in that they're not going to go up against each other, obviously, but they may influence each other. And I suspect that in Aidan O'Brien's mind, he's probably thinking, well, if this filly can take care of the mile races later on the season, the definitive championship mile races, then we might think about moving Churchill to 1.25 miles and exploring longer distances for the high prestige races for his legacy as well. So I think that they do influence each other, but I think as far as this is concerned, big tick next to Winter, because from everything we've seen on the track and everything we know about the 3-year-old fillies, she's not only head and shoulders, but probably midriff up ahead of the rest. So that's those 3 dealt with. Ribchester, 2 big ticks. Winter, 2 big ticks. Churchill, question mark. And then we come to Caravaggio, another of Aidan O'Brien's. It sounds like I'm anti-Aidan, but I'm not at all, I promise you, because Winter's a superstar and he's the best trainer there is, so please don't think that. Caravaggio's price underestimates how good Harry Angel is, and that is the bottom line with this. Caravaggio, no doubt about it, is a superstar, and what he did at Royal Ascot last year, when he won the Coventry twice, he beat those in his group in the middle, and then he looked at Memas over there and said, oh, I better beat you as well, and he went over, he did that. That was one of the most remarkable performances I've ever seen from a juvenile at Royal Ascot. Lady already. But this fella is a superstar, and his reappearance in Ireland at Navan,
Nace, I think. Yeah, I've got it noted down.
I mean, that was a wow moment of the season. We haven't had that many of them, but when he kicked in the turbo and went clear, you thought, well, what's going to touch him in the Commonwealth Cup? But then 6 days later, Harry Angel turned up in the Sandy Lane. And it was a real coming-of-age day for Harry Angel. He hadn't been grown up before. Well, this was almost the day when he turned from a boy into a man. And this is the thing, and this is where, you know, Timeform ratings have the limitations. Handicapping has its limitations in generally. But our data tells a really significant tale with Harry Angel, and that is from a time perspective, from a form perspective, he's every bit as good as Caravaggio at the minute. And it's not a case of undermining or underrating Caravaggio, it's just saying that we've probably got 2 stars on the sprinting scene amongst the 3-year-olds right now. And just because of that, I would stop short again of weighing in with Churchill. And the feeling is that, you know what, having a horse like Harry Angel is going to give Caravaggio a tour that he could only dream of, and he's just going to love that scenario. But by the same token, just beware about the strength and the power of Harry Angel. All the data around him says he's every bit as good as Caravaggio and will give him a handful in the Commonwealth Cup next week. So a bit of a question mark.
Is it a 3-way race with Blue Point, or no? Has he got something to find?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is the sort of wise guy pick, isn't it, Blue Point? Because you look at Ascot where he beat Harry Angel and you think, well, he's beaten that horse once. It didn't come from out of the blue because he was a real crack 2-year-old. But I think that he might be standing still while Harry Angel and Caravaggio are making leaps. And that's the problem with Blue Point. And I think that, yeah, it's an easy sell in terms of he's a good bet in the race because of his form lines. But the impression is that when it comes to the big day, I'm not sure about him. There is this American horse, isn't there? One of Wesley Ward's.
Yeah. I can give you the name in a sec if you...
You at home are the same in that you're sort of betting with your ears as much as your eyes and nothing to join those dots.
Bound for Nowhere?
Yeah, Bound for Nowhere. I'm hearing really good things about that. In that he is really confident about that horse, is good enough to challenge Caravaggio and Harry Angel. And we're only dealing in videos. It's hard to equate that form with embryonic American horses like that. Obviously, one thing we are brilliant at Timeform because of our American arm out there is that we are in a really good position to equate form lines. But we're dealing in developing 3-year-olds, so that just makes it all the different. But from the vibes and from what you hear, Bound for
Nowhere.
Bound for Nowhere is bound for somewhere, but the sound of it. And then Order of St. George. And this is just personal, this. I can't tell you that he's a good bet. The scenario is the same for you, is the same for me, is the same for Nick, is the same for everyone. In that this is a black and white issue in terms of you either see Order of St. George, his win last year, and say, well, if he reproduces that, nothing's going to beat him, and even money's a gift. Or you think of the Dr. Jekyll, or Mr. Hyde, whichever it is, of Order of St. George, which has seen him being beaten 4 times since the Gold Cup, 3 times at odds on, and there is a flaw in his makeup somewhere along the line, which means that he does tune out on occasions and doesn't give his full running. And the moment he dips slightly, then everyone's got a chance in that. So it's different with him in that you can point to various form and say, well, nothing can beat him. And that is the bottom line with this. If he reproduces either as winning this last year, or don't forget his 3rd in the Arc de Triomphe, then nothing can touch him in the Gold Cup. It's in his mind rather than his body, because his body and his engine is the best that there is on show. But because of that up and down profile, because of that hot and cold nature, again, I'd rather leave him. So we'll talk about a few others in there, but Ribchester and Winter are 2 as good as certainties as far as I can see. With the rest, I'll be worried that one of them will let you down.
So you're all about the double then? The
hefty double. Yeah, we'll find another
double,
one later in the week.
Yeah. Right, well, you touched on Church a bit early on, so before I open it up to the floor, I want to go back the floor.
The cyber floor?
The claw? No.
The claw.
I want to go back to Churchill because I find Barney Roy a really interesting prospect here, and it's really interesting on Timeform ratings. I've got his the master ratings are the 2 in front of me, and Churchill 126 small p, Barney Roy 125 small p. Where do these both stand? Because Churchill's a double Guineas winner. Is that rating very high for a horse to achieve that, or is it quite low? And as a consequence, where does that rate Barney Roy's performance in finishing 2nd and meeting all of that trouble in the Guineas?
Well, to explain some of the mechanics behind it, looking at the master ratings, you'd think it's £1 per length because he was beaten by a length and there's only £1 between them. It's not. We deal in a higher pounds per length scale over a mile at that time of year. And it's just our interpretation using various markers and data sets, including sectional times, and obviously the evidence of your eyes, I wish you could see, that these two are closer together still than they could show on the day. Now, in terms of historical standards, which is another thing that goes into our automatic handicapping and our calculations with every single race, Churchill's not that high in terms of a Guineas winner. We're talking a sort of standard Guineas winner. But nothing about Churchill is standard, is it, or average, because the impression is that he's one of those horses who doesn't deal in flashy, he doesn't deal in star making, he just deals in getting the job done and rolling his sleeves up. But by the same token, think about their careers as well at that stage. In the Barney Roy had raced just twice, and he was coming in cold, and that really showed in the race. Whereas Churchill was hardened from a full 2-year-old campaign. Ballydoyle set it up beautifully to get him into a winning position, and obviously his talent and his tenacity did the rest. But these two are really close in the betting. Oh, sorry, these two are closer still in reality than they are in the betting, I think Barney Roy's got a real shot of beating him.
What do you think about the prices? Is it fair? I think it's 4-6 Churchill, 2-1 I think is Barney Roy at the moment.
Well, sort of over time in the last week, 10 days, these two have come closer and closer and closer together. And I think it just reflects the general opinion of people taking a step back and looking at it dispassionately and clinically and analytically and thinking the same as we rated at the time, that yeah, actually there's a length between these two horses, but when you compare how polished one was compared to the other, there's not going to be that much between them. As we sit here now and look at the prices, 8-13 or thereabouts Churchill, 2-1 Barney Roy, general price. It's hard to say now that there's any juice in Barney Roy's price, because as much as we can elaborate on the reasons why he might reverse the form, we're dealing in a special horse here in Churchill, who's got a track record of beating everything put in front of him since his debut, just gobbling everything up. So we're at a stage now where it's hard to say there's juice in his price, it's hard to say he's a good bet. In contrast, I've got very much the same about Harry Angel and Caravaggio as these two, and they are more like, there's much more discrepancy between their prices in there. So as I sit here now, it's hard, you can't say that Barney Roy's a good bet because he's 2-1 to beat Churchill. For Christ's sake, I mean, who's going to say that's a good bet? But still, ask me whether Barney Roy has got a shot at reversing form with Churchill. Yeah, but that's the price he should be now.
Okay, so we'll see how we're doing for questions, shall we? Yeah, well, someone's asked what your best bet is. We've heard that, haven't we?
Ribchester, we think. I think.
That's Michael, anyway. Someone's commented just Lady Aurelia.
What? Talk about her.
Lady Aurelia. Well, yeah, unless they just like us saying her name.
Obviously, she did something last year at Royal Ascot, which is probably never to be repeated. But that doesn't mean that 90% of the Lady Aurelia we saw in the Queen Mary won't be good enough for the King's Stand. You probably all heard about the reports from Wes Ward and how well she galloped on the track yesterday. I think it was under Ryan Moore, who stood in for Frankie Dettori, who will ride her next Tuesday in the King's Stand, but is out with that shoulder injury, so Ryan stepped in. And the gossip is that Ryan just gave name, rank and serial number to the assembled press afterwards, but then was waxing lyrical in private with Wes Ward, who likes a bit of showmanship anyway. So Lady Aurelia is not going to finish second or third. She's either going to win by 4 lengths or she's going to crumble and crack like toffee under a hammer and just blow out and wash out completely. And what you would say about this is that this looks a really good King's Stand. We've got another flying filly in there called Marcia, who on Timeform ratings is £1 behind Lady Aurelia. That's nothing. Sprints, top level sprints, any sprints are decided by fine margins, and when there's only £1 between them, and when you've got the record that Marcia has of non-stop progress, of non-stop flourishing, and of a strategy as well that might worry Lady Aurelia, and that Marcia tends to weave through like a motorbike, and Lady Aurelia obviously just blasts out and tries to last out. But the harder that Lady Aurelia goes, the more the scales are tipped in Marcia's favour, because she'll be able to finish fast off that strong gallop. And it's not just those two either. We're dealing in Signs of Blessing, who's a French horse. We've got the fastest horse in Europe, which he definitely is, against the fastest horse in America, which we think that Lady Aurelia is. And they're both one-dimensional, and something's got to give when those two are going head-to-head. So again, just the way the race is likely to be run and that sort of strategy in play, you're thinking that Marcia might actually hold a few aces up her sleeve, given that they're likely to go head-to-head. And there are other horses in there as well. Last year's winner, of course, Profitable. The new Profitable, which is Priceless, who won the Temple for the same connections. It's a really strong race, that. And I wouldn't back Lady Aurelia. She's a classic backer to win and later to place, because there's no in-between with her. There's not going to be any in-between. So she'll either do something spectacular or she'll blow out completely. I personally think that this offers an opportunity to have a crack at her with something else, because don't forget that we didn't see the Lady Aurelia at Royal Ascot afterwards, whether it was in the pre-morning when she scrambled home, it was in the Cheveley Park when she pulled out and didn't last out, and even a reappearance spin, I think it was on Brig Keenan, like most of theirs do. She was without blinkers. When you watch that video of Lady Aurelia's reappearance over in America, what's significant is that they hold her up. They're trying to teach her something new. She stalked the pace rather than forced it that day, and seemed comfortable with that scenario around a turn, on home ground, obviously. But you sort of, the more she's trained, the more she's going to be lit up, and she could do something spectacular, or she could blow out completely.
So, just to touch on her trainer, Wesley Ward, who's got something of a real knack for winning at Royal Ascot. I don't know if you saw this, I got a stat through by email from David Johnson today, our flat editor, who was looking at Wesley Ward's strike rate in general. And over 5 furlong races in the UK, he's got a 32% strike rate. Over any further, it goes down to 5%.
Is that right? Yeah.
The rivals beaten's still quite high. It's 47.9 as opposed to 65% over 5 furlongs. But what the interesting thing is, Lady Aurelia, his real key player, looking at the week. Is it going to be in these?
Not at all. No, she's a bonus, really. We don't normally have the Wesley Ward graduates coming back to Royal Ascot for a second year. Normally, they're just so wound up as 2-year-olds and so fired up that the shelf life is quite short, or they tend to flash and burn and then disappear gradually. So I think it's significant for him that she's back, that he's sort of had one eye on this already, and that she's back and that he's bullish, but that doesn't really set him apart. One point to make about Wes Ward as well is that it's almost a parody, it's almost a cliche, but his 2-year-olds, we all say, they're like 4-year-olds, they're all like groks, they're all massive, they're all muscled up, and they are so far ahead physically of the European 2-year-olds that's where their edge lies. But this is sort of a survival of the fittest, or of the strongest, because don't forget that Wes Ward starts out with 50 or 60 2-year-olds back in February, and he's already lining them up for Royal Ascot, and it's the ones who thrive on the work and who are the most substantial who get given this task and get on the plane over here. So it's not reflective of him as a trainer or him in terms of his specimens, that whichever 2-year-olds we see are built like brick outhouses, because it's just that these naturally are the strongest, the most precocious, the most mentally forward of all the 2-year-olds he's got as well. So it's easy to just label him as, training these monsters who come over and nick out prizes, but there's so much more to that. And Lady Aurelia is a really interesting one, because you can imagine if he wins an older horse race, which he did do with Undrafted, won the Diamond Jubilee, or the Golden Jubilee as it was then, but it would be a real tick in his box, and you would see him in a different light if Lady Aurelia won. So I think that's a really important horse for him, to show Britain that he's not a one-trick pony, and that means that she'll be trained to the minute, but equally, we're back to that point with Lady Aurelia of either washout or scintillating.
It's interesting that it's good that we're talking about sprinters here, because the next question from Ryan is about Quiet Reflection, who came back at Haydock, and she finished, I think, 10th that day out of 13 the other week. Was that a good prep run? Do you think she's going to turn up at Royal Ascot? Will she need the ground? Does she need a lot of rain? What do you think about Quiet Reflection?
Well, I think that the point is it the rating they've got? Is it the amount of Group 1s they've got? Or is it the consistency they show? Because if you judge it on Group 1 wins, she did what no other sprinter did in Britain last year, and won the Commonwealth Cup at Royal Ascot and won the Haydock Park Sprint Cup. So she's a brilliant and very fast mare. The problem with Haydock was that it's easy to point to the ground being unsuitable. It's easy to point to her being rusty after a long absence, but this wasn't an isolated case in that, yes, it's the only evidence we've had on the track, but you might have heard the report from Carl Berg even before that he was just sort of shrugging his shoulders and a little bit not effusive about the way that she was going even before that. And her weakness in the market on the day said something as well. So with quiet reflection, she's one of those forgotten horses that, because the nature of Royal Ascot, we deal primarily, and look at the betting, we deal primarily in the horse who've done it recently, who've shown the sparkle recently. You don't have to go back too far to find the form which entitles Quiet Reflection to win the Diamond Jubilee. It's just that I don't think that this is one isolated incident at Haydock. I think there was some head scratching going on about whether she's really there and attuned right now. So I would never put you off a horse, but I wouldn't back her personally.
Without having the prices in front of me, I'm pretty sure she's 16 to 1 at the moment.
Yeah, well, that is a big price.
Oh no, sorry, 12. Still quite a big price. Do you think she's the sort of horse where she needs everything to drop right? Particularly considering the run that she's just put in at Haydock, or I think that's a bit harsh.
No, I don't think she needs everything to drop right. In fact, I think she's probably the least nuanced sprinter out of most in Britain, because you think she can do a 5 or 6 furlongs, softish ground, fast ground, from the front, from just behind the pace, from the back. She's really tooled up in terms of her different qualities she's got. It's just that she was so far removed from the Quiet Reflection that we all remembered in a reappearance at Haydock, that it does fill you with a little bit of doubt about whether she has still got all of the gears that she did. We'll just linger on this race for a bit longer, because everything I said about Quiet Reflection, you could throw back at me about Limato, because this is a horse in a very similar position. Brilliant last summer, has flopped in America over a mile, then came to Dubai, or went to Dubai early this season, flopped again badly. But he's a fascinating horse, Limato. He's always sort of intrigued me, and I've always followed him throughout his career, because this is one of those horses who, sectional times that we obviously deal in quite a lot, forms a significant and substantial part of our analysis these days. His early career suggested that he was something special. He was winning tin pot races. He never ran in a group race a 2-year-old, but every time we saw him, the sort of people who deal in it were looking at the clock and saying, is that definitely right? Can the horse like that do that? So Limato there's only 2 horses with higher Timeform ratings than him at the whole of Royal Ascot, and I'm just sort of intrigued by that. I'd almost forgotten about that myself. So in my article for Royal Ascot today, which you can read online now or soon,
sneaky.
If Nick pulls his finger out, Nick too pulls his finger out. I interviewed Henry Candy this morning.
Oh, right.
Because I was sort of wanting to pull out there. I was a bit sick of the build-up in the press to Royal Ascot, which centred around Wes Ward, naturally, didn't it? It was saying, look at these American guns, look at these Irish horses, Vaden O'Brien's, his brilliant horses that are coming over. The French challenge is really strong this year. We'll talk about some of those later. And I just got a bit patriotic and started thinking, well, someone needs to speak up for these British horses. So I looked at Limato. I thought, well, yeah, you remember him last summer. What he did in the July Cup was sensational. Won by 2 lengths, won the foray on the bridle, second to Mecca's Angel and Nunthorpe over 5. You know, he was asked to look this horse over 5, 6, 7, a mile last year. So I thought, I better get the inside line here, because there is a bottom line to this race again, in that Limato has got figures and gears that the rest just don't have. So it's just a question of whether Limato is at 100%. You can read it online soon, hopefully, but he was really confident, Henry Candy, that he had the horse back to where he was. I said it hasn't been an easy process since he came back from Dubai, but gradually, gently, they've worked him and he has worked out back in his routine, and he's really happy with where he is right now. Another bit of an exclusive is that he was a bit dismayed at the King's Stand, Lady Aurelia, Marsha and Co, because Acapulco has come out of that now. She met with a little setback, remember, that means that she has to miss Tuesday. Aidan said that we sort of still hope that she might make the Saturday race, but what that has happened with that is that he booked Ryan Moore, he said, for Limato. Harry Bentley, who used to ride the horse, that association has ended by the owner.
Mm-hmm.
Very
interesting development, that one. Yeah.
But he booked Ryan Moore, and you wouldn't book Ryan Moore if you didn't think that he had the horse 100% anyway. But he said that if Acapulco runs in the Diamond Jubilee, we're going to have to get another jockey. But he was quietly confident. He said he's convinced that the horse is back to where he was. He's really happy with his progress in the last couple of weeks. Stiff six, I think now that sort of experiment with the trip has been shelved once and for all. He said that himself, and he said, we know what this horse can do. We know what he needs to bring it out of him. And just the signs and the listening to Henry Candy, he was quietly confident, but reading between the lines or listening between what he was saying, the sort of even more so, I think that he's really happy with Limato and he's confident that he's going to bring his A game. Because this race, like the Gold Cup we talked about with Odyssey and George, there is a bottom line with this race in that if the Limato who won the July Cup, who was second in the Nunthorpe, who won the Foray, if that one turns up, then none of these horses have got his speed that can be sustained for so long. So hopefully that helps with Limato a little bit.
You talk about that though. What about the champion sprinter of the Tin Man? Who?
Oh yeah.
You know, how does that compare the form of Limato's July Cup against the Tin Man's Ascot success?
The Tin Man, if you read the Timeform comment, you'll see that he won champion sprint at Ascot. And you think, well, champion sprint is sort of the definitive world title, isn't it? But obviously, it's the end of the season. Limato was sort of gonna go, not go, gonna go, not go. They decided not to run that and wait for the Breeders' Cup, which was a failed experiment and a plan. But Limato, on the week before, was a short price favourite for the champion sprint, reflecting what he'd been doing in the run-up. And the Tin Man had certain advantages on the day in that Signs of Blessing, a horse we've talked about already today, the Trailblazer, he really teed the race up. And the clutch of horses on the stand side, which included Quiet Reflection, they always struggled and always played catch-up because Signs of Blessing with the arrowhead, the Tin Man was in his path and slipstreamed him and everything went right. It didn't come from out the blue with the Tin Man. He worked his way up all the time. And the suspicion is that we're going to see a different the Tin Man from the one who reappeared at York. Jubilee York?
Yes. Yeah.
So, that point I made about Limato being definitely the best of the field in terms of figures, that is true. But with a horse like the Tin Man, he's still on the up. You know, his general curve is on the up, so you don't quite know his upper limits as yet.
Okay, well, we've jumped from Tuesday to Saturday. I'm going to pull us back to Wednesday now because I've had a good question or a statement from Egger.
Egger.
E-double-G-E-R, yeah? Egger Arm.
Egger Arm.
Yeah.
Welcome, Egger.
It's just saying that Highland Real looks a good thing in the Prince of Wales Stakes. He's had his critics, but he's a prolific Group 1 winner. Is that... He's won a fair few in his time, hasn't he? You know, and he won the Commonwealth Cup. Is he the one to beat, or in Ulysses and Jack Hobbs and even Decorated Knight, is he going to find his match?
It's a wider point, this, about a horse being underrated, and I hear this a lot, particularly in conjunction with Highland Real, in that he wins these Group 1s, and people say he's an underrated horse. In no other sport at all, is a horse rated and assessed so specifically as in racing, because it has a rating, whether it's a Timeform rating or the BHA rating, which is an exact calculation in terms of pounds of what this horse can do. And every time we see the horse, it's also assessed in the betting, in that it tells you exactly what chance it's got and what it should or shouldn't be doing in the race. So I never think that Highland Real is underrated at all. He's a brilliant horse. He's far more than ratings can ever tell you. He's one of those horses who ratings doesn't do a good enough job of describing and prescribing the horse, because his consistency, his durability, his versatility are all things that come into play. But he's in no way ahead of this Prince of Wales field. It sounds like, from the market support today, that that's his destination. We sort of all presume that he might go Hardwick, because he was second in it last year, and I think he's probably more at home at 1.5 miles than 1.25 miles. But it's a winnable Prince of Wales. This was supposed to be the big showdown between Minding and Almanzor, two of last year's finest, but they're both, one's injured presently, minding. The other one was in or out of sorts there in the season, which meant that his comeback was delayed.
Yeah.
So we've suddenly got this Group 1, which isn't a Group 1, which is in Highland Reel's favour. Because, let's look at it dispassionately. He's been beaten quite a few times, Highland Reel, by what you wouldn't call stars. He was second best in the Judemont International by Postponed. He was beaten by Dartmouth in the Hardwick last year. So he has his limitations, and that doesn't mean that he's not a great horse, because for a horse who's fairly limited in terms of ratings, he's done a remarkable amount and got a CV to match it. But if a Jack Hobbs turned up on his A game, if a Ulysses builds on what he did at Sandown and looks as good as what he did there, then I don't think Highland Reel has got the talent or the speed to match those two, just pulling those two out the air. So, Egger. I have my doubts about Highland Reel. I have been known to be wrong once.
Oh, well, I wouldn't like to comment.
But look, he's a brilliant horse. Of course, if you're backing a Egger, then you're hoping that Ryan moves on him, and Ryan Moore was able to get that easy lead that he got in the Coronation Cup in America last year, where he tore off, and he's got that capacity to get an edge on the field from the way that he races and is comfortably racing. But in terms of form, there are 3 or 4 horses in this that are as good as him, if not better. So that means that you can't say he's a good thing, in my opinion.
I'm wary of the fact that we haven't actually answered many questions, but
yes.
Very quickly to touch on Jack Hobbs very, very quickly. Is he a risky proposition judged by his injury record?
Oh yes, fragility, yeah. Ran just twice last year, only seen him once this year. This was a big step forward. It's about trusting John Gosden, isn't it? And there's no person I'd rather trust, I'd rather spend an hour with, having
Johnny G.
A cup of coffee than Johnny G. Maybe Matty Singh would join us as well. But I have got tremendous admiration for John Gosden, and even though all my senses say not to, I would trust anything at all that John Gosden said. If he said today was Tuesday, I'd say, yes, John, put your hat on, let's carry on down the pub. So I've got a soft spot and a blind spot for any John Gosden horse. Jack Hobbs, he was brilliant in Dubai. I think the original plan would have been to gone for the Hardwick and then the King George, because they see him more as a 1.5 mile horse. But we're back to that point that suddenly this is a Group 1, a prestigious Group 1 that's up for grabs, and that has meant that they're looking at this race with a different eye. So I think Jack Hobbs, even with that fragility, I think that Gosden has got inside his head and sorted him out this season. We saw that in Dubai. And it has been a plan rather than anything sinister that he's been absent since then. He just said that, right, he's done that job, we're on to phase 2, which is Royal Ascot. And I think that he should be 2-1 favourite.
Okay, let's have a look. Oh, someone disagrees about Barney Roy.
No, I can get that. I mean,
there's an interesting one here about Dream Castle. He's a Frankel colt, isn't he?
Yeah.
Jess has asked what you think of his chance in the Jersey Stakes, assuming he goes there, or just generally for the week. Is Dream Castle a Royal Ascot horse? He was emphatic when he was Doncaster, wasn't he?
Yeah. There is some disagreement in the Timeform ranks with this, and obviously, in public we're all right behind the ratings, we're all right behind the horses, but you know as well as I do, and everyone at home knows that even though we're a team at Timeform, as someone once said, there's no I in Timeform, we all have our individual thoughts about this. And Dream Castle is top rated, and you know what, coming back to 7 furlongs is just a ticket, because he's another one of those Frankel eager, exuberant, over exuberant horses, and the faster that he goes, the better he is. But there is a big spanner in the works here with Le Bravido, and this is the master trainer Andre Fabre we're dealing with, who was second to Bramato in the French Guineas, and he's cutting back in trip to 7 furlongs as well. So we've got two horses who were exceptionally good for a Jersey. We could be dealing in 2 Ribchesters here who won that race last year. I've still got great hope and great faith in Dream Castle, but the fact that Le Bravido is there for Andre Fabre and the strength of that form, with the winner having subsequently won the French Derby, means that I'm going to sit out of that battle but really enjoy the race.
That moves nicely into the next question from Alex. He says, do you have a best bet amongst the 2-year-old races?
Well, Alex, the first thing you're told at Timeform is bet with your eyes and not with your ears. As in, don't listen to gossip, don't listen to vibes, just see the evidence for yourself, work things out for yourself, because that will serve you best over time. But who amongst us doesn't like a bit of gossip? Who amongst us doesn't like a bit of hype? And you can see for yourself on the video, but this Happy Like a Fool, who's Wes Ward's in the Queen Mary, that's the race that he does send. You asked about is Lady Aurelia his primary player for the week? I don't think it is, but I think this Happy Like a Fool is the one who, if you asked him in private, he would say, I'd be surprised if she got beat, because it's a twofold thing. It's the substandard nature of the 5 furlong 2-year-old fillies in Britain and Ireland, and it's the power that she showed on her debut. It's the power that she's spoken about in glowing terms. Well, back to the point, in personal terms, using your eyes and not your ears, the other way around, is that we're honing in on the Chesham at the end of the week on the Saturday, and I made the point earlier that this Clemmy finds herself at the top of the market because there's a presumption that she's just going to do what older brother Churchill did last year and make that leap from a debut to winning at Royal Ascot.
It was a nice debut.
It was a nice debut, but yeah, she was third. She was behind a Jim Bolger well-backed horse, Gastra or something, and a horse with experience of Joseph's called Never Let Me Know Now, Never Let Me Go. It's not called like that, but it's something. Yeah. It's got those words in. But there was a race at Goodwood, and it was won by a Godolphin horse called Massar. And I was watching it at the time, and you know what Goodwood's like, and everyone does, that when you're on the back foot of Goodwood, it's game over, isn't it? Because it's a downhill track, it's all about speed, it's a really fast funnel. So for a horse to overcome his greenness and his position over 6 at Goodwood was really impressive. And Massar, he's got the Timeform large P, because our reporter looked at that and said, well, we're only scratching the surface of that horse's ability, even though he's won. So obviously, we're dealing with Aidan O'Brien 2-year-old versus Godolphin 2-year-old. There's normally only one winner in that battle, whether it's 2-year-olds or older horses. But for this instance, using the eyes and rather than the ears, this is the perfect example where Clemmy is favourite, but she comes in about here, albeit with all that promise. Massar, after that Goodwood win, comes in about here, and yet he's 10-1 and she's 7-2. So that's just the form angle into the Chesham for me. But Happy Like a Fool, the one to see which way that goes in the Queen Mary by all accounts.
Well, it's good as well that you said always don't listen to the hype, because I think the last time you were on Facebook Live, you famously scolded me during the Cheltenham Festival for I can't even remember its name. What was that French radio?
Oh, Tizard.
Yeah. You told me off for suggesting.
Did I send you?
Yeah,
you a clip.
Yeah, you sent me out of the room for that one.
What was that called? It was rubbish.
I can't think of it.
Beginning with an A.
Yeah. Oh, comment if you know it, and yeah, that was one of the strangest ones. So just scrolling through now to find another question. Someone's asked what your best bet for tonight is.
God, I'm sorry about that.
No, I don't even know what's on tonight. Kent. No, was that last time?
Haydoc's on tonight, isn't it?
Should know that's my local course. We'll jump back to some of the questions I've got for you, and quite a generic one really. When people talk about anti-post betting for Royal Ascot, talk always comes to who's going to be the best jockey and who's going to be the best trainer. Mm-hmm. Now we've got in Ryan Moore and Aidan O'Brien heavily odds-on favourites. Yeah. Are they, or is it all about them, or have they got a lot of short price horses like Order of St George that could very well be beaten, and it's just reflective of that? Is there anyone that springs to mind that could have a good week?
Well, there's. I think with Aidan, it's more clear cut in that Ryan can only ride one in a race, whereas Aidan can and often does field 2 or 3. So, as you've seen several times this season already, Wings of Eagles, Winter in the Guineas. Sometimes it's the 2nd and 3rd strings, or even the 4th strings,
or the 9th or
6th, yeah, who suddenly step up to the mark. So for Aidan, I think it's pretty categorical in that he's got too many good horses going for good races and too many backups and support acts for him not to be champion trainer. And he is the best trainer in the world, isn't he? So it's only right that he should do that. With Ryan Moore, sounds like I know him, don't I? Let's just call him Ryan. With Ryan Moore, it's obviously a bit different in that he's aboard 1 on each race. And as I've said, just my personal question marks over Churchill v Barney Roy, over Caravaggio v Harry Angel, over Order of St George and his temperament. When you dig into some of his short price horses who are bankers and who help formulate that price, it's just not quite so clear cut. And it's worth remembering also that despite the fact that he won the last at least two jockeys titles at Royal Ascot, he was behind last year and needed 3 on the Saturday in order to become top jockey. So we were in a similar position last year, and it looked on the Friday as if Ryan Moore wasn't going to do it, and then he fired in the treble on the Saturday. And I suppose that if it's not going to be Ryan Moore, who's it going to be? William Buick is going to ride a lot of Godolphin horses, and a lot of prime Godolphin horses, their best ones through the week. You might consider him. But Frankie Dettori also is going to get on a lot of these Wes Ward horses as well. So with Ryan Moore, I don't think it's as clear cut, because it was the case last year when he looked to have a similar book, that he was struggling and short until Saturday, and then with Aidan O'Brien, I think and I hope actually that he is champion trainer, because this is our biggest stage. He's the biggest trainer in the world, and we want those two to marry up sort of for that showpiece event.
Okay, we talked earlier about Order of St George in the Ascot Gold Cup, and I just want to touch on the opposition. You know, we said that he could potentially be vulnerable if the Order of St George that got beat in the Irish St Ledger turns up. And in Simple Verse and Big Orange, he's meeting 2 formidable opponents, and they're both 10-1 in places. Are they? Where do you stand on?
Yeah, personally, I'd rather have a cut at one of those 2 than rely on Order of St George and weighing with him at a short price. What's interesting is that you sort of assume that because these are familiar names, Simple Verse, Big Orange, Order of St George, that they would have mixed in the same circles and contested the same races, at least on occasion. But he's never gone up against Big Orange, Order of St George. He's a new challenger, and that's because Big Orange, the time has come for him to stretch out and have a crack at 2.5 miles. He's come up against Simple Verse once. That was in the Champions Stays event last year, when she actually finished ahead of him. He had one of his off days, excusable because it was 2 weeks after the Arc. But the fact is that he faces an opponent who has beaten him once, and he faces a new opponent in Big Orange. And I think the Big Orange is the one that I'd be heading towards, because he just brings something new for Order of St George to worry about, and that is this sort of attacking, aggressive ride. It is a good strategy for the Gold Cup. You might not think so because it's 2.5 miles, but that play is still a good one for Ascot, and we don't know what we're going to get from Big Orange over 2.5 miles. He's never set foot beyond 2 miles before. He could use that as a negative, but equally he could use that as a positive and say, well, every time we see him, what we know about him is that he tries hard and he's got loads of stamina. So now he's in an environment when he's going to have to show a lot of stamina, and he's certainly going to have to try hard. But can you imagine if there was little between them 2 furlongs out in the Gold Cup, and Big Orange was aggressive from the front and Order of St George was cruising next to him? At that point, you know who you'd want your money on, because there's just this idea that Order of St George might be a bit fragile in the mind, whereas we know that Big Orange is capable of toughing out to the end. So as far as that race is concerned, I think I'd rather play Big Orange. And then Simple Verse, I've got a lot of time for Simple Verse.
And good reappearance as
really
well.
Good.
Yeah. Another name that caught my eye, whether or not he runs is another thing, is Idaho, who is, flopped in the stumbled and seated in the St Ledger. Didn't harsh to say flop. An okay reappearance. Is he a big price at 16-1?
Well, from a form point of view, he is, isn't he? Because he's that classic background of a horse who ran in the Derby, who contested the St Ledger, and Aidan O'Brien has got such a brilliant record at graduating horses from middle distances to long distances that the very fact that he's bringing him, it looks like, in support of Order of St George is a significant statement in itself. I forgive the Coronation Cup because A, that was when the team arrived late, wasn't it? B, Highland Reel was clearly the number 1 player there in that day, and he was ridden as such. And C, 1.5 miles around Epsom probably isn't his bag, Idaho, these days at least, because he's showing more stamina as he's getting older. So I'm certainly a case for saying that that's the wrong price compared to, Torcedor, who's the same price as him.
Yeah.
He represents Jesse Harrington, but He's the horse who beat Order of St George as well when that one was a bit low key first time out. But Torcedor has got a big leap to make just to get to Idaho's standard. So those two at the same price just feels a bit wrong to me. If
you were thinking of having a dabble in Idaho, is there a danger that he could be a teammate rather than an opponent? Or do you think he's too good to be treated as a sideshow?
Hidden uses exceptional horses to help shape a race, so it's not out of the question. But how much can Idaho shape the race when you think you've got a one-dimensional aggressive horse in Big Orange? He's not going to mess with him. True. And the more that it's on stamina, the sort of more wobbles that might sit in for Order of St George. So I think he's there on merit. And if he hadn't have stumbled and he'd have won the St Ledger, because he would have won the St Ledger, wouldn't he, when you see how it worked out in the Harbour Law, as admirable and as courageous as he was and as good a story as that is, Idaho would have won by 4 or 5 lengths, wouldn't he? So if he had been able to complete there, then we'd be dealing in a 7 or 8 to 1 shot, certainly, I think, for this.
Just to say, by the way, we're going to go in about 5 minutes time, so if you do want to ask Jamie a question, do chip in. But we're getting towards the end now, and I'm just looking, we've touched on most of the Group 1s, I think, now, really. Which of the races are you looking forward to most? Is it Ribchester in the very first race of the week, or...?
Well, Ribchester's where the heavy money is being put down. The Commonwealth Cup is a fascinating race with Harry Angel and Caravaggio. I think that is going to be a real kingmaker and a star maker. And then the support act of Blue Point, Bangvano, where is it? That is an electric race. The 2-year-olds is fascinating because right now the 2-year-old bunch in Britain and Ireland isn't of a standard you'd normally expect going into Royal Ascot. The one horse who is standing out is this Alpha Centauri, the Jessica Harrington horse who's 2 from 2. Now, she has got a rating behind her. I think it's 106p. She's the best 2-year-old we've rated in Britain or Ireland this year. And it says something for the colts, doesn't it, when she is the highest achiever amongst what we've got. But I think the Fairyland is the horse who's going to represent Wes Ward in there. There's just not quite the buzz about her as there is about the Queen Mary filly, Happy Like a Fool. And Alpha Centauri, the main thing about her figure, 106p, is that would have won her every one of the last 9 renewals of the Albany Stakes, which is her target. So she's about 9 to 4. On form, on potential, you probably think she should be shorter than that because of how far ahead she is in the pack. The one thing at the back of your mind is that for the second of her wins, it was on softish ground, and she really sort of motioned through it. It was really smooth for her. And Jessica Harrington did say that she sort of hopes that that it's not fast ground outright at Ascot, because she thinks this filly's there for the long term, and she's got a suspicion that some ease in the ground, or at least some good ground, is what's perfect for her. But Alpha Centauri is, I think that she's the flag bearer for Europe in the Ryder Cup of 2-year-olds, because Wes Ward has got most of the other boxes ticked. And the Coventry is interesting because there's this Arawak who's the Wes Ward horse. Again, there's good buzz about him, but that's not unusual. We've got De Bruyne horse who won at Epsom, who's got a brilliant attitude. We've got Dinar, who's much like Memas for Richard Hannon and Al Shakab. They have got certain limitations. There is a roof on their form, we think, right now, but the 2-year-olds is a significant division, because this is the most open and fluid division, especially this year. And one thing to mention, Nick, is that we often see Royal Ascot for the 2-year-olds as the end game, that it's a race to Royal Ascot, that the most precocious horse tends to win out at Royal Ascot, and then we don't see that much of them afterwards, which is true to some extent. When you think back to last year's 2-year-old winners, Churchill won the Chesham, the rest is history. Lady Aurelia won the Queen Mary, she's back front and centre in the King's Stand, and
Caravaggio won the
Coventry, and look where he is now. So I think it's good for the Royal Ascot that we've got these 3 returning champs who will look bigger and better than ever this year.
To touch on De Bruyne horse, who I'm glad you mentioned him, because he's the second top 2-year-old on our ratings with 104p, I think. How good was his coat win at Epsom? Was it just a case that he was the most professional, or is he a classy type who can get better?
This is a horse who the times tell you more than the horses he beat us. So at Ripon, when he won, he was second favourite. There was a Godolphin Horizon shot who'd beaten him before, and De Bruyne horse grabbed the rail at Ripon and won by about 7 lengths. And you thought, well, the Godolphin horse hasn't turned up. This has had the run of the race, an easy lead against the rail at Ripon, and he just cleaned up. It was just capitalising on circumstances. And then we get the time figures through. The next day, after all the performances, the time figures are run. And the De Bruyne horse was one of those where you went, oh, right, didn't expect that. And it told you that he was a good horse. And the same at Epsom. Different style in that he came from behind rather than in front, caught the Johnston horse, but you were left feeling that, well, it was probably a substandard woodcut and that he only had one to beat, and there's a question whether that one went on or even matched the same level. But again, we got the time and you think, well, no, what this horse doing is he's fully deserving of that rating of 104, which puts him sort of top 3 in a regular Coventry Stakes. He would have to lift the bar a bit more, but so does everything else from Britain and Ireland. And so the race revolves around this Arawak, another Wes Ward one, of how good he is. But look at the prices, Nick. When these Wes Ward horses are red hot, they are forewarned by the market and they go off 7 to 4, 6 to 4, don't they? With this fella, it's clear that, well, there is some reticence about him, or some awareness that he might not do that. Wes Ward specialises mainly in the fillies compared to the colt. He's never won the Coventry before. He has won a Windsor Castle, and maybe he's a Norfolk, but he hasn't won a Coventry before. It's a different ball game. But yeah, good point to make. And the De Bruyne horse, he's the best or the highest rated 2-year-old colt we've seen this year. He's got a good attitude, he's got speed, he's got the ability to race prominently. So 7 to 1, 8 to 1, 7 to 1.
Yeah, depends where you shot.
Yeah. But that, he probably should be more like a 4 to 1 shot, given that relative to most of the rest. Sorry, just mention this horse here, Verbal Dexterity. If anyone saw this dinosaur turn up at the weekend in Ireland, he was as green as grass for 2/3 of the race, and this Jim Bolger horse absolutely powered away, won by 9 lengths, I think. It was galloping away and still didn't know what it was doing. Its legs were sort of all over the place. Its head was just around and about everywhere. It was stargazing. So you think, well, it was soft ground. It was 7 furlongs as well. And how can that horse take what it learned there and put it into practice in an environment like Royal Ascot, dropping back in trip and likely facing different ground? But David Johnson, who's coming on to do one of these
on Twitter on Monday,
on Twitter on Monday, so stay tuned for him because he's our 2-year-old handicapper. He made a really good point in that when you look at the amount of horses, the few horses who've been dropping back in trip for a Coventry, you would not expect them to go the other way as 2-year-olds, but the horses dropping from 7 to 6 tend to do really well in the Coventry. They tend to have sort of stamina and aggression and powers that the 5 and 6 furlong horses haven't come across yet. And horses like Henry the Navigator was one who won on his debut over 7, came back. War Command won over 7, came back. So just verbal dexterity. You see that on paper, watch it for yourself, go and see it. He's a big dinosaur, ploughed through the mud over 7 furlongs. You'd think that can't win a Coventry, but he was really impressive in terms of being able to do what he did at that stage. And don't be too put off by either coming back in trip or going on the ground, because the stats say that actually it's quite a good move and a positive move rather than a negative one.
Okay, we're running out of time now, so I'll just quickly try and squeeze in a couple more questions. Declan, you can watch this back. It'll be on our microsite. It'll also be here on Facebook. Just to answer his question, he just says, "Can Caravaggio be beaten?" We were a bit unsure when we were Harry Angel, aren't we?
I'm not going to put you off, Declan. It's just a buyer beware of all the data around Harry Angel, the time performance, the sectional time performance, the historical standards of that race and what it normally takes out to stretch a field like that means that Harry Angel is right up with Caravaggio. And I think that Caravaggio's an absolute superstar, absolutely so. He was our highest rated 2-year-old last year, over and above Churchill. But this Harry Angel has got the tools to really worry and make Churchill have his hands full. The suspicion is, Declan, that Caravaggio is going to be in dreamland having a tour through the race by Harry Angel, because it's just going to be like a piece of work for him, only an electric piece of work, and one that you'd think he would thrive and flourish under. But just to buyer beware that Harry Angel, as Timeform ratings say, is every bit as good as Churchill is, as Caravaggio is at this stage.
And finally, there's a question from George, an interesting one actually, just saying, is there any vibe around any of Kevin Ryan's runners at Royal Ascot? Is there anything that you've heard? He's mentioned one flaming spear in the Wokingham.
Well, the last I heard is that Kevin Ryan has still shut up shop. He's got this equine herpes. We talked about Almanzor being out for the being out in the spring, which meant he couldn't make Royal Ascot. It was a Jean-Claude Rouget's stable that he had this outbreak of equine herpes, which meant that some horses actually died in that.
Sorry,
oh God. Some horses actually died in that, and it's only recently that they've got over it. And obviously, he's won the French Derby and the French Guineas since then. But Kevin Ryan, the last I know, he had shut up shop. Just for the north, Mark Johnson will have a few. We haven't talked about the Queen's Vase and the horses involved in that, but that's slow boat Capri. Love the Queen's Vase, won't he? But are you stopped laughing at dead horses yet? But
I need to grow up. You said herpes and that was it.
But what about that Santry, the Declan Carroll horse, who won a division of the Brocklesby and then won at York? You wouldn't want that to stand on your foot because that's about 6 foot tall in horse terms. The deal in hands, don't they?
Hands, yeah.
Feet and inches. But I'm obviously biased because I'm from the north, you might have detected. Halifax is just about in the north. Timeform does revel in the north. Fahy's going to win with Ribchester. Santry's got a really good chance in the Windsor Castle for Norfolk for Declan Carroll. And Mark Johnston, it wouldn't be Royal Ascot if he didn't pepper the bullseye at some point.
And perhaps even Tom Dascombe in Cheshire. Yeah.
Northwest though, it's
North. Yeah, well, that's my territory. So got a shout at the northwest. Right. Well, I've got one more question.
One more.
If you have a closing statement, and Royal Ascot, I don't know. No. Anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to quickly mention or think we've been quite?
I'll make 2 quick points. Number one is that have a go at not necessarily the accumulator that we discussed, but have a go at an accumulator. It's Royal Ascot, it's the cream of racing, you've got all that evidence in front of you. I'm certainly going to put 3 or 4 into an accumulator. I know that it's not cricket in terms of what racing analysis should be saying, but here we are at Royal Ascot with all this at our mercy. Have a go, try and win money that makes a difference. And the second point is that the beauty of Royal Ascot compared to what Cheltenham say is that Cheltenham is just the end game for these horses, in that even Aintree and Punchestown are sort of after the Lord Mayor's show. These horses have one aim, that's Cheltenham. On the flat, it's purely the midway point, and the beauty of Royal Ascot is that it tells us the divisional champions at halfway, and it sets up the battleground and the battle lines for the next sort of second half of the season and the championship events. So is Churchill or is Barney Roy going to be the best 3-year-old miler? When's Winter going to step up and take on the elders? Who's the best stayer at this point? Who's the best sprinter? These are all sort of questions partly answered by Royal Ascot, but the beauty of Royal Ascot is that it's a comma and not a full stop on the season, and it sets up all the battle lines for the future.
Okay,
and Ribchester's going to win the Queen.
And Ribchester's going to win the Queen.
How about that tip and odds on shot in the first race? I'm looking down a steep hill if that gets beat.
Jamie, racing blogger Lynch, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Right, final one then. The most important question of the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Queen's Hat.
I do have some inside knowledge that it's green on Thursday.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the source?
A spokesman for the Palace said that green on Thursday.
Okay.
And if you back green on Thursday for the Queen's Hat and send in to Timeform your losing slips, we'll give you a free horse search when we're on our engine. So that's it, you've heard it. I've said it now.
Yeah, I'll go one better.
Yeah.
£5 free credit on timeform.com.
Gosh, what are you doing, man? Get it all sacked.
Okay, well, thanks very much for joining us, I suppose. If we didn't get around to your question, I can only apologise.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but join in next Monday.
Yeah, we'll
David
be doing
Johnson,
it all over again with David
far
Johnson
more shrewd,
Monday,
far more knowledgeable than me. Specifically 2-year-olds as well, then on the cover of the things. But he will mark your card with all the 2-year-old races. Okay,
well, because of the setup we've got, I'm going to have to run round to turn this off, so you're going to have to sort of look busy for 4 or 5 seconds on.
Okay.
Oh, what a way to finish.